in that horrific situation, I had to find hope. I had to find optimism. I had to have a vision. I had to find a way to get past all the naysayers, the people that would tell me it's impossible, you can't do it. And these were all medical professionals, by the way, so, they know what they're talking about usually. I said to my team, I want you to surround me and I want you to fill me with positivity and I want you to protect me from everyone else. No negativity is to get through to my ears. Can you do that for me? And these guys, yep, absolutely. Because when you have hope, you have a chance. Not to say that you'll win, because sometimes you won't, because all of us are going to die. I lost my dad 2.5 years ago, and I threw the bus at it, I can tell you. And I know that I did everything that I possibly could do. It broke my heart.
This episode of A Beacon of Hope is proudly brought to you by Campfire Studios. To find out more, visit campfirestudios.co.nz. 2, 3, 4. A Beacon of Hope is a weekly podcast that shines a light on the human spirit and explores the power of hope in our lives. Join me, Will Fleming, as I talk to people from all walks of life about where they find hope and how they use it to navigate life's challenges.
Be good, be safe, and be happy.
This week, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Lisa Tamati to A Beacon of Hope. Lisa wears many hats: ultra-endurance athlete, author, motivational speaker, and health optimization coach. Lisa's life and incredible journey are a testament to the power of human potential, but her path has not been one without struggle. Lisa has battled self-esteem issues, body image concerns, weight problems, and mental health challenges such as depression and anxiety. But these hurdles have helped build Lisa into a figure of resilience, teaching her to conquer the seemingly impossible, to strive for the extraordinary, and to beat the odds. I guess I just want to acknowledge the fact that you said yes to doing the podcast with me, and I'm hugely grateful. Time's the one thing that none of us get back. So for you to give a couple minutes, I very much appreciate it. We just talked briefly before recording, and I think there's a really fun chat to have, and a very optimistic one, around meaning, optimism, where that comes from physically in our body and our mind. And I feel like that's one that you're having every day with yourself in terms of trying to find what the hell's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it's something that all of us, I think, need to work on a daily basis. It's not like any of us have got it really sussed, have we? Work in progress, as they say. But I think one of the big key things that I'm big on is just getting back up when you get knocked down. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be on the ground. It's okay to deal with whatever's going on in your life and fall to pieces. The key is, do you stand back up again the next day or an hour later or whenever? Can you get back up again and go again? And that is, I think, that resilient piece that I wrote a book recently called Relentless, and it was the story of bringing my mum back after a massive aneurysm and stroke hit her 7 years ago, and she was left with massive brain damage. And we were told at that time, like, she would never do anything. She would never have any quality of life. Put her in a home and she'd be gone very, very soon. And in that horrific situation, I had to find hope. I had to find optimism. I had to have a vision. I had to find a way to get past all the naysayers, the people that would tell me it's impossible, you can't do it. And these were all medical professionals, by the way, so they know what they're talking about usually. And this was an incredible story of bringing her back to full health within 2.5 years, from someone who was 74 years old, massively brain damaged, unable to even put food in the mouth or sit properly without flopping over, no vestibular system, no balance, no idea who she was or what she was. She was like a baby. To get her back to being able to walk 3 to 4 Ks a day, go to the gym 5 days a week, get a driver's license back, for crying out loud, which you have to have your full capacity in order to do that, right? Full mental capacity. It was an incredible journey. And I've seen, a brain go from completely messed up to completely normal again. And so I wanted to write this book to give people hope, and to say also that even when you're up against it, sometimes you can beat the odds, and that if you go all in and you start looking outside the square, and in relation to the medical world, and I'm in this space now, I work in this space, you have to understand that what you might be hearing at your local clinic is not necessarily what is the only thing out there in the world. So if you're getting a really bad diagnosis for something, or some terrible things happen to you, don't stop searching there, is my advice. To start to look outside the square, start to go further, start to look on PubMed, start to listen to, good sources. And that's always a hard thing. I've learned what is a good source and what isn't. I've learned to research and how to study. But sometimes there are answers, and I've ended up now, 7-8 years later, I've written a book called What Your Oncologist Isn't Telling You, because we also had a journey with cancer. And Mum was given a terminal cancer diagnosis 2 years ago. That she had like 8 weeks to live. That was 2 years ago, and currently we're cancer-free, touch wood. Wow. You never want to say you're cured, because it's, and with the cancer that she has, it's in the brain, so we can only tell every year when we get an MRI how we're doing. But what I found was that we were offered nothing. We were told there was nothing she could do at that age, at 80, and there was, it was going to happen very quick. And I studied the metabolic approach to cancer. I went out into the world. I got the best doctors in the world, the best scientists in the metabolic approach. I developed my own protocols, put a team of 15 doctors together. It took us 12 weeks to get rid of the tumours, and we've been able to stay free. It's been a huge journey. She has an extensive protocol. I've walked literally to the ends of the earth to find answers for her. But now I can share that knowledge and I've collated all these interviews that I've done with all these amazing doctors and the research, and put that as a resource for other people going through this journey, so that they have access in one place to some incredible information that's taken me a long time to collate, and represents 50 years of research. And you won't hear any of that at your local clinic, none of it. Because, and then it's not to say that they don't know anything. They do. They know their chemo, radiation, surgery, brilliant at that. But there's the somatic theory of cancer, and then there's the metabolic approach to cancer. And this is an ongoing research area. But I would encourage people to look at both theories and both sides of that equation, and not just look at the one side, because sometimes there are answers that you may not have, come across. In our conversation, it's really about, okay, we've been up against it so many times. Like, my mum is meant to have died, so many times. And when she's told by a doctor, and she, Isabel, this is terminal, there is nothing we can do, and we walk outside of that office, and that's happened to us more than a dozen times. My mum just turns to me and says, they don't know you. They don't know your people. I'm not taking that on. And walks off as if nothing's happened. And I'm like, man. And I'm like faking it, right, until I make it. Yeah, Mum, this is it. And we've got a plan. I've got a plan. And sometimes you have to fake it until you make it. Like, you've got to give people direction, hope. Because when you have hope, you have a chance. Not to say that you'll win, because sometimes you won't, because all of us are going to die. I lost my dad 2.5 years ago, and I threw the bus at it, I can tell you. And I was in a situation, because he was in ICU, where I had no control. And so I was unable to get for him what I needed to get for him. And so I know what it is to lose. But even in that horrific situation that we were in, broke my heart. I know that I did everything that I possibly could do. And, that gives me a little bit of peace, even though I'm, still working on changing some of the things in the system because of that. But his legacy will be another, it'll bring forth other things, and it is already. So you don't always win, but you have to go and act as if you're going to win.
Yeah, and do you think, Lisa, when you take that seriously, when you say, I'm going to control what I can control, hope is found in that? Because I think people are wishing that things would get better, but that's different to hope. I've talked to psychologists about this, and there's a clear distinction between wishing things better and actively doing something, like moving towards it. And I think that's what they would consider hope as.
Absolutely. And it's holding a vision that no one else can see. In every second of every day, working towards that vision, depending on how big the problem is that you're facing. My ones that I've given you as examples were big. So they, consumed me in my mission. But as an athlete as well, I had the same approach. And this is why I've been able to do these things, if you like, have quite incredible rehabilitation journeys. And not only with my mum, I now work with lots of clients, and I've had some amazing people, reversing their diabetes or coming back from Alzheimer's and dementia or after concussion, like incredible journeys, is because if you can hold that vision, or your loved one can hold that vision for you, and you can just start aiming for that all the time. When you've got a place that you're going to, and you don't let any negative person come into your world, then you've got a chance. And as an athlete, I did the very same thing. I remember I did a race in the Himalayas, which was the world's highest race. This was, I'm an ultra endurance athlete, or I was. I'm retired now. 222 kilometres over the two highest motorable mountain passes in the world. Extreme altitude. I'm an asthmatic. I don't do well in mountains, and I don't do well in the cold. It's one of the reasons why I spent most of my 25-year-long career in deserts, because I wasn't good in the cold. But I heard about this amazing race in the Himalayas, right? And I wanted to do it. And there it came down to, altitude was the biggest problem, because we were going from up to 5,800 meters twice within a 60-hour period. Now, that's not what you do, okay? If you know anything about altitude, it's in the first year they ran this race, this was only the second year when I did it, the first year, two of the three runners, there was only three, ended up in hospital. Some of the crews had ended up in hospital, and one guy had made it. And the guy that had made it, he was not your average human being. Like, he'd run Death Valley with me, which is another big race we did in the States, and he'd gone on after the 217K race, climbed Mount Whitney, which is a 4,000 plus meter mountain, and then ran back through Death Valley back home. He did a double crossing, in other words. So he was not your average human being, but he made it, and that proved that humans could do it, because no one thought that was possible at that point. And so I was like, oh, my God, I want to do this race. And I rang him, and he said, what was it like? And he said it was the worst, most bloody tough thing I've ever done, and that's saying something. He said, and I've still got health consequences from it a year later, but he said to me one thing, he said, Lisa, do you realise no woman has done this race? And I went, didn't hear anything else. And so I went about going, all right, I'm doing it, because I want to be the first woman to do this race. And I had no idea, and I know that I was an asthmatic, and I knew that I also suffered quite badly from anemia. I had a lot of, menstrual problems, and would lose a lot of blood, and had not enough oxygen carrying capacity, even down here at sea level. So being up there was going to be a mish. And then I ended up, so I got this thing called a hypoxico tent, which is something that you sleep in that takes a part of the oxygen out of the air. And this was meant to help you adapt to altitude, but I went too hard in this thing because I'm an idiot. And I went 6,500 meters and slept in it every night, and ended up with a hypoxic brain concussion. So I damaged my brain, and I was doing weird things, and not remembering people, and then I was like, oh shoot, maybe I'll push it a bit hard. And then I ended up with infections all through my body. When you don't have enough oxygen, your body proliferates all the bacteria, and they start to really take over. And so I ended up with a whole lot of infections. And then I ripped the ligaments off both sides of my ankle when I was doing a race, a preparation race. I actually survived the race, and I actually did it when I was doing a photo shoot with the North Face, who are my sponsors, the following day. And so that was I was not going to be able to run for 7 weeks, and the race was 10 weeks out. So I was just having this dreadful time. I was not enough blood, not enough, infections, hypoxic brain concussion, doing a race that was on the edge of possible for humans, and I wanted to be the first woman. And I went over there, and it was brutal. It was the wildest thing. But one thing that I did when I got over there, and I was terrified, and we had these doctors that were trying to educate us on how you can die from cerebral edema and pulmonary edema, and they were studying us as guinea pigs because no humans had done this before. And all this fear-mongering, this telling us how you're going to die, I was just absolutely terrified at that point. And then we had the Indian Army who do a lot of military operations up there. It's on the border, sort of, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all that sort of area up there is close. And they do a lot of altitude training. They know it inside out. And they were like, you can't do this. People are going to die. This is crazy. It's not what human bodies designed to do. And so they were trying to stop the race. So there was all this stuff going on. And I was just like terrified. And I remember at one point where I'm like, am I going to pull out? Because I've had the worst lead up and this is just horrific and I'm terrified over here. Or am I going to carry on? And I thought about it and I was like, I've flown all the way to India. I had my crew. I had a film crew. I had sponsors. I'd spent a year and a half preparing. There was a lot of money on the line as far as, sponsorships and things go and responsibilities. And I'm like, well, I'm going anyway. So then I got, a crook gut, because as you sometimes do in these countries. And so things were just going from bad to worse. The doctors were taking our blood. Everyone else was adapting to altitude. I was going backwards. I was anemic, severely anemic. And then I just got to the point where I was like, right, okay. I said to my team, I want you to surround me and I want you to fill me with positivity and I want you to protect me from everyone else. No negativity is to get through to my ears. Can you do that for me? And these guys, yep, absolutely. And so they did. We separated ourselves from the others. They probably thought I was very snobby, but actually I was just trying to hold my shit together. And they just filled me with positivity for 2 days before the race started. And it worked. I started to feel more like, okay, we got this. I've got a great team. We've got this together, And I remember waking up on the morning of the race and just absolutely terrified because you're staring down the barrel of this 222K race in the Himalayas. And all you want to do is run home to mummy and, hide under the covers and you've got to go and face the music. And, so in my head, I'm like pumping myself up because that's the other thing I do. Whenever I'm terrified, like maybe I'm getting on stage or I'm, to speak or I'm going to run across the Himalayas, I'm building myself up in my head. You can't let that negative, I can't do it, come in. It's there, it's talking to you, but you've got to really shout it down, basically. And so, like I'm beating on my chest and I'm getting my, power posing on and I'm thinking like, I'm singing the Maori Battalion song because that one always gets me going, right? Whatever's going to make me get some more testosterone in my body so that I can go and face the battle. And that's exactly what we did. And I had a wonderful crew and they were just with me the whole way. And I've got a whole documentary. If anyone wants to reach out, they can reach out to me. I'll send them the link to the doco. But we managed to do it. It was hell on earth. It was a lot of walking, a lot of asthma attacks, a lot of moments where I thought can't take one more step. But we did it in 53 hours and 5 minutes. And I was the second woman home. I was beaten by a 55-year-old grandmother from England who also had asthma. Like this is not. You'd think something like that would be the 25-year-old super athlete bloke, right? It's the ones who can hang in there and the tough ones, the people that have been through a lot and have come out the other side and have that resilience to keep going no matter what.
And I guess the thing is, where the optimism and hope is found is because everyone told you to not do it. And you still had to say yes. And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you is, where do you think that what's the right word there for you, that willingness to say yes when everyone says no? Because if you look statistically, man, so many people say no. And we're all kind of bred now to say no and to conform. And, I'm trying to work out what the hell's going on in terms of what does it mean to trust your gut? You were trusting your gut, even though, it was
Yeah.
crook. It was crook.
It was
And
a crook gut. I think part of it is you're born. Like I do genetic testing as part of my company now, and we do health coaching and genetic testing and things like that. Part of it is genetic. We have certain predispositions that we are born with that with different combinations of hormones and neurotransmitters and things like adrenaline and testosterone and all these things that are going to affect our personalities. So studying genetics was just absolutely fascinating for me from a health perspective, learning what was good for me personally, what was the right food and when to eat and what type of exercise. And I actually found out that doing the super long distance stuff was not suitable to my body. That's one of the reasons I don't do it anymore, which is funny. Not that I could never do it again, but it's not conducive for me living a long time, which is what I'm about now. Longevity and anti-aging is my gig now, after having smashed the crap out of my body for too long. So I think there's that part of it where, I have a lot of adrenaline, and I was exposed to a lot of testosterone in utero. So when we're being formed in mum's tummy, we have different taps, and then you have some people have more energy go into their digestive system, others into their nervous system, others into the musculoskeletal system. And this affects how we grow, what shape we end up. And you can see this in the body types of people and what they're meant to be. And then we also have influences then on what personality traits we develop off the back of that. So I have a lot went into my nervous system and some into the musculoskeletal system was the two sort of areas where I got a lot of energy, if you like. So I have a lot of adrenaline, and that means that I have to move all the time. So your typical ADHD kid, like just got to move, can't sit in the classroom, can't sit down for more than 5 minutes. And so I've learned to deal with that, and I build my day. And I think one of the reasons I've always been self-employed or have my own companies is because I don't fit into the box of anyone. I can't sit in an office for 8 hours. I go mad. I have to move, and I have to have control over my own body. And so I've arranged my life that I can do that to a large degree, so that I can manage my emotions, manage myself from a fitness point of view and from a health point of view, and I've sort of gravitated towards that. And that's why I love this, because now I'm like, I'm not weird. That's the way I was made, and it's an acceptance of who I am. And it's beautiful when I do genetic coaching with people and I tell them, and they're like, you mean I don't have to try to be like my neighbour down the road who I thought was, I would love to be like that and I can't, No, and here's your strengths. And here's the things that you might want to think of. And here's how you were made to be. And it's, it's a positive shift. And you are not them. You are you. And here's what's special about you. And here's the good, the bad, and the ugly of that goes along with it sometimes, and how it might be, good for you to manage yourself. But it's like getting a user manual for your body. It's just, it's pretty amazing. And I think understanding that and having empathy, it's given me more empathy to understand how other people are different to me, and that I shouldn't expect them to live into my standard of what I have for myself because they have a different genetic makeup, and that's okay. And it's beautiful. I work in corporate teams where we might get executive, leadership teams together, and they may be struggling to be working with each other. And when they start to understand the differences in the way that person's thinking and the way that person needs to move and that person needs to eat and that person needs to do all these things, it just brings more empathy into the room, because then that's your strength and that's your strength. Like my strength in my businesses, and I've had, business partners, and I used to drive one of my business partners mad because I'd be just constantly seeking out the new thing, making new contacts, having brilliant ideas, and off on a mission all the time. And he was like, well, hang on, we haven't got the systems together. We haven't done the guidelines and the this and the that. And I'm like totally unsystematic. Like I'm organic in the way I think. And so we used to butt heads. And then we came to the realization, actually, that was his strength. I can create this vision and connection and opportunity for us, and he'd put the the back office stuff in place, the systems, the processes to make that happen, he'd have a hard time keeping up because of the speed at which sometimes that I'd be going all over the show. And sometimes he'd have to pull me in and rein me in, and he was right, like I was going off on too many tangents at once, which I tended to do. So in that way, it was a beautiful marriage of his strengths and my strengths,
yes,
rather than butting heads because you're different and I don't get why you're like that.
From what you're saying, beautifully articulated, it does reveal that we're somewhat flying blind or without a manual, and you can see where we end up doing, like you're running these massive long races, but your genetics say that's probably not suited, but there's no other way to find it unless you, I think, kind of chase it. And I'm even thinking of myself, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, I'm the opposite to you. I was happy to just go with the flow my whole life, to sit quietly and find that calm and to observe, and until I had a bad manager, and then that awoke some other part in me, which is like, I'll never let someone have control of me again. And I wonder if those genetics can awaken in you through your circumstances. And maybe I don't really know what I'm talking about because
no. I'd love to do yours. Actually, it'd be interesting. Like just looking at you, because I've taken 1,000 people through these programs. I can look at people and I can not to the nth degree and to the degree when we're talking about the health, but some general personality traits. And I would, just looking at you, I would say, and I've never met you in person, right? But I would say that you're one of those strong, stable, nurturing people that is the leader of people, that has a very strong ability to carry on for a long period of time at a steady pace, both from a sporting perspective, strong, powerful. The person that in the caveman days would have been the leader of the tribe. Come on, people, follow me. And you'd steadily go on. I'd have been the warrior running off in and out, doing, hunting, gathering, whatever, and falling apart and then coming back and resting. You'd have just been pacing along, I think. I'm assuming here.
No, I think you're right. And we've all got our other funny quirks, and maybe we carry trauma from different parts, but I identify with all of that. But there's also the part of me which is so quick to hand it over. And I've had to train myself. No, that's not what required. You don't just have to seek harmony by handing the power all the time. You can balance that. And I think that's what's been beautiful about finding a person to roll with in life, and to call that person your yin to your yang. And, my wife's opposite. She's German. She's really, as they say, regelmäßig, straight. And tell me, stop, too many ideas, And but that's a beautiful journey, and it's a conversation I wanted to have with you around this whole, because it's not just zeros and ones. There's all these interweavings, and if you look indigenously, that is the case as well. It was never about putting you in a bubble. It was about letting you be more fluid. Just on that, you were talking about the hypoxic stuff. An interesting story is I interviewed a professor from Israel, and he talked about old cave art. And he said they wouldn't just go down to the caves to do cave art. They'd go down there because there was less oxygen. And what that was allowing them to do was reconnect with their gods. So I wonder if you popping yourself at 6,000 feet in a tent helped you have, like a connection. And I mean, look, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but wouldn't that be cool if that's the case, that you, just by thinking you're training for your big, event, actually unlocked parts of your mind, which is helping you now?
I think, when you're doing extreme sports, when you're pushing your body and your mind to the absolute limits, then I have had what I would call almost spiritual experiences. I don't, adhere to any one religion. I'm still trying to work out what the hell's on the other side, or is there another side? But, times where you've tapped into things, or you've gone to a place where, like quite often in ultramarathons, when you push to the nth degree, you can have hallucinations and things, and it's almost like doing some mushrooms, because you are tapping into places. Or I was running along with a girlfriend in the Sahara at one point, and she just lost her grandmother, and we were like pushing really hard in the Sahara, like 40 plus degrees, dehydrated, really in shit creek, really. And she just says, she turns to me with tears in her eyes, and she said, my grandma's here with me. And she was really feeling it, and she was like, this is just powerful, and she was having the spiritual experience as we're running through the desert. And, is that because the brain is in extreme danger, like your brain's cooking? Or is that you've let go of all of the normal framework from which you operate, and you've tapped into somewhere? I don't actually know. But I do believe, I had Dr. Bruce Lipton on my podcast, Pushing the Limits, a while back, it must be a year and a half or so. And Dr. Bruce Lipton was a molecular biologist, and he talks about the frequencies of cells. And he says, like, when someone dies, this is his belief, and he used to be the straight-laced scientist until he started to study cells, and they would take some cells and they were from a person, and they'd put them like 50 miles away, and they'd do something to the person, like an electrical shocks or whatever they were doing, and the cells over there 50 miles away would react. And he was like, hang on a minute, what's this? That doesn't make sense. And so on a and I'm probably butchering the science of what he's studied, but he's like, the membranes of a cell is where the brain of the cell is, and that we have these the frequency of a person is tied up in that cell. And he said, but when we die and our body's broken, that it's like a TV show that's coming through your TV set. If a TV set is broken, is the broadcast gone? Right. Or is the broadcast just not being able to be channeled through that broken TV set? And I was like, wow, that would be cool, wouldn't it? So I've adopted that sort of idea,
That.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true, but it does make sense of some level that we inhabit our body, that we are maybe somewhere else, and we're just broadcasting through this body, so to speak.
And when you were giving that example of you asking your team to turn the positivity on, maybe you were changing the channel metaphorically, right? And saying we've got to...
The frequency of any, definitely the frequency that they were approaching me with,
And I guess that, because one of the taboo areas and an area I try and bridge with podcasting in different formats is around the area of suicide, and specifically suicide prevention. And I can't get my head around, I mean, obviously I can if I didn't have enough mentally, physically, and I didn't have support and buffers, I can imagine how you could only see how the light would be squeezed out of you. But how do we have that conversation about turning the light back on? And as far as I can see, it's only about exploring what are the contributing factors, nothing about what you're talking about, which is maybe your hope will be found in doing something really hard, or grabbing that 5 people and saying, turn the positive on because I really need you. And, the fact that we can have this feature within us humans, which essentially is hopelessness. And we see that, right? We call it suicide, and it's just so brutal. And
it is. It touches all of us. I lost a friend this year, and we'd been working together all day. And, he went next morning, got up and hung himself. And I was just like, what the hell? Why did I not see that? And he had COVID at the same time. And, on that point, I think COVID can cause neuro inflammation, which can cause people to go over the edge if they've already got, some issues going on. And so, and I experienced this myself when I had COVID, that I was depressed beyond depressed, and I was shocked because I know how to manage myself, and it was and I've talked to a lot of doctors on this. It seems to be a real thing that neuro inflammation can really push people to the edge, and and on that point, I do a lot of study in brain rehabilitation. I'm writing a book at the moment on how to optimize your brain. Of course, I've been through this journey with my mum, taking her from like a baby to a fully functional, then losing her again through the cancer, and then bringing her back again, and seeing the plasticity of the brain and the ability of the brain. And I've worked with lots of dementia patients and people with Alzheimer's and so on, concussions and these sorts of things. And I can tell you from a health perspective, I would like to connect the dots today in people's brains that what's going on in your brain is a direct connection to what's going on in your body. If you have inflammation going on in the body, it could be in the microbiome, it could be somewhere else, then that can very much affect your brain. And that things like, your serotonin is produced largely in the gut, and our immune system is in the gut. So if you're eating poorly, if you've got a poor microbiome, and then there's genetic factors as well, these all contribute to the inflammation and the problems in the brain, which could be meaning that you're not getting enough serotonin, and therefore you are depressed, or you're down, or you're not calm, or you're not, so going back to, and when I'm working with Alzheimer's patients, I just did an interview with Dr. Dale Bredesen, who's the world's leading expert in Alzheimer's, and he said we look at a number of areas. We look at toxins, we look at the microbiome, we look at the environment, like is there mold in the house? Are they exposed to some toxins? Is there a glyphosate poisoning like Roundup, or is there mercury, or is there something like that in the environment? Is there parasites? Is there worms? Is there something going on in the microbiome that needs to be taken care of? Is there trophic factors that are missing, things like hormones and vitamin D and things like this that can have something as simple as vitamin D has a massive role to play in the brain. And if you don't have enough vitamin D, then you could well be having problems with depression and so on and so forth. Basic things as well as immune system. Like vitamin D does over 1,000 things in the body. And we, it's just these sometimes simple things. Zinc, another one, super important. Magnesium. These are just basic nutrients that a lot of us are missing because of our diet and, fast food lifestyle and, some of the toxins that are in the environment. And if you think about it, like the average person, they say, is exposed to 500 chemicals a day that our grandparents never saw. So we are dealing with this toxic soup. We're dealing with a high-stress lifestyle where a lot of us are at the edge of what we are able to cope with. We've got, phones that can reach us 24/7 and things coming at us all the time, financial worries, our kids, whatever the problem is. Then you've got an immune system maybe that's down and a microbiome that's got some trouble, and you've got to throw in a couple of parasites and a virus. And you've got a pretty, big issue here. But some of this is very addressable and very able to be, and it's like Dr. Dale talks about the 36 holes in the roof. He said fixing Alzheimer's isn't finding the magic drug to get the amyloid out of the brain, which is what the pharmaceutical industry has been spending billions on. He said actually the amyloid's there for a reason. It's an antimicrobial. It's there as a result of something that's going on. Let's look at the reason why it's going on. And he talks about plugging all 36 holes, and there could be 50, but it's plug that one, plug that one, plug that one, and then slowly but surely you might be able to bring your brain back online. And as someone who's taken somebody through that journey, I know that to be true. With my mum, it was a multi-pronged approach. It was getting rid of toxicity. It was doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It was a keto diet to feed the brain good fats. Our brains are 70% fat. We need good fats, good quality fish oils, all the olive oils, the coconut oils, these types of things that give us the good membrane. Plasmalogen is one of my favorite new supplements that has come out for brain health. All of these things are just absolutely key. You put all of those in place, and that's a big job, and it's a process, and it's trying to work out what your particular problem is. But then, it's not this one pill mentality, I call it, like where you have an ailment, here's a pill for the ailment. What happens then? You get a side effect. So, here's a pill for the side effect, and then here's another pill for the side effect of the side effect. Nobody's gone back to the root cause of the problem because it's difficult. And it's not done in 15-minute, appointment. Absolutely. It's a process, and this is where I think, like doing a lot of having people that are health coaches and stuff that can guide people through lifestyle interventions and change is a very big piece of the health puzzle going forward, and something that I'm a big proponent of, so that we can alleviate the doctors in this, like they're seeing 30, 40 patients a day for 15 minutes each. Like, how the hell are you going to ever get really deep with a model like that? So we need to train up other people to take over other aspects of that, I think.
It's the conversation that we should be talking about all day, but other things replace it, our
Yeah.
desire to think about other countries. And I mean, those are all important things too. Climate change, I agree that those are hugely important, but so is what's going on in the universe inside,
Yeah, fix yourself first.
Yeah,
Fix yourself first.
and I think, all those things that we've thrown out with the bathwater, like, we've had a little bit of tongue in cheek in this podcast about what do we believe. And I'm not someone who's strong enough to say, but I give it all over to a being. But I do know that I've read some studies about when people are in church, they connect on a level. Yep. And there's these heart rates sync up, and there must be some healing benefits in that. And now that that's not part of society, what are the symptoms?
He's a Dr. Joe Dispenza. Check him out. Like he's works on a lot of these sort of areas. A doctor who healed himself from a very badly broken back in multiple places through his mind, like just thought himself well. Wow. They say that glibly. It took him 6 months to rebuild his spinal cord. I mean, it's an incredible story. And now he goes around the world teaching, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is what he's tapping into. And I think there is stuff that we just don't know, and let's just be humble about that and go, well, this is, I'm not quite sure, I sort of don't think it's a man with a white beard sitting on a cloud, but I do think that there's something beyond what we can see. And, of course, I think living with that hope and that deeper connection to other human beings is very important too, I don't listen to the news. I'll be honest. The news is anywhere in my vicinity I leave because it is just fear-mongering. I don't need to know about the school that was shot up in America. I don't need to know that a bus of people. Those things are going on all the time, unfortunately, in our world. They're not things I can influence. They are things that are going to be detrimental to my mental health and well-being. So I'm not going to put those in my brain. I'm going to focus on the people around me, the ones that I can help, and I'm going to focus on myself to protect myself so that I'm strong enough to help those around me. I cannot influence those sorts of big things out there. And so worrying about that is pointless. If I'm strong enough and I have enough resources, then I can do something in my community and I can do something in my country maybe, or build an online community or whatever. But the first place is I have to have my household somewhat in order, and that means protecting my psyche, So I just protect my psyche massively from any negativity in my environment. And if I come across people who are very negative, I very quickly cut them off as well. Because it's just, you have to, if you want to do good in this world, then you can't be surrounded by negativity all the time because you're not going to have the power,
I get a sense that maybe one of the things worth believing in, and tell me if you agree with this, that it's worth believing in you. And I know I'm not trying to make that sound cheesy. I feel like when I talk to you, Lisa, that you're someone who believes in you, that that the things you've done in life are about showing you that you're enough. And I just want to grab a little bit of that energy and to share that and to know that actually that's a thing to believe in. That's something you can't really prove to anyone, just like believing in the, bearded fella. But that would be something more practical if you could imagine that believing in you would be enough. So I like that.
Yeah, and I think, I think what would be really important too is to go back over all the things that you've gotten through and that you've overcome or you've achieved, and to pat yourself on the back occasionally. Like when I go through a hardship or something that's really tough, I go through some of those things that I did and I achieved and I overcame, and that gives me strength to fight the next battle, because I'm like, well, I ran across the freaking Sahara. Maybe I can face this challenge that's thing, and I know that those, unusual examples, but we've all got things in our background where there was this time when I overcame this, therefore I can overcome this as well. And that gives you strength. And the more, this is why I'm a fan of pushing the limits, which is the name of my podcast, is because when you push outside that comfort zone and you do something that scares the crap out of you, whether you succeed or you don't succeed, you've learned on that journey, and at the end of the day, that's what life's about, isn't it? Learning things. And then if you come away from that going, well, I failed at that race, maybe I didn't make it because of X, Y, Z, but what can I learn out of it? And that's, like with mum's journeys and dad's, with their health journeys, I was determined. I had the vision of writing a book. With mum, I had the vision of writing a book to empower other people, and that was part of my vision for getting her back, right? Because then I've turned her horrific, horrible, tragic, terrible story and all the crap we went through into something positive for somebody else that's going to empower and inspire and help somebody else on their journey. And that gave me a reason, like, why did this happen to us? Why did this terrible thing happen? I've turned it into something positive, even though don't want to repeat it. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to go there anymore, but I'm trying to take the learnings from it, and I'm trying to help somebody else with it. And that's brilliant, I think. If you can do that, if you can take that negative thing that happened to you, turn it around and empower you to empower others and to give to others. And I think, like, I'm a sort of very open book person. And I think when you share the good, the bad and the ugly, as it is, it's not, like you said to me at the beginning, people have a perception you're a superhero. And I'm like, hell no. If you lived with me, you'd realise that wasn't the case. You know what I mean? It's, the perceptions that you have of other people are the canned versions. They're the Insta-glamour moment. They're not the reality of that person. And I like to share the good, the failings, the bad, and, got a hell of a lot more to learn, got a hell of a lot more to do, and coming from a place of humility and coming from a place of let's learn together, co-learning, like when I'm working with clients in my practice, it's a co-learning journey. It's not that I have all the answers. I have some ideas on how maybe you haven't connected these dots before. Do you want to explore that? Let's go and maybe test this or do that or talk to so-and-so or study that. Let's see if we can connect the dots for you and help you on your way, And that's a different approach from I've been to medical school and I know everything approach that sometimes you get. And I shouldn't say that with tongue-in-cheek. I have some, amazing doctors that I work with. Absolutely amazing. So not trying to come across as too arrogant there, but you know what I mean? It's not that, but the good ones are humble. The good ones are interested in their clients. They are with their patients. They are caring and curious, and they are continuing to learn because there's new research coming out. I hate it when I get anybody who's arrogant. And I've met quite a few of those as well. Yeah,
can definitely agree on that. And that arrogance has its own kind of power skill set that seeps its way into your psyche, and and that's that thing you were talking about before. Got to bring your people around, turn the positivity on, and I just hadn't had it said to me like that in terms of a way that's real. The stakes were real high for you, and most people would be like, "Oh yeah, that's nice. It's a nice to have," but it's like, you took it serious, and I love that because it now means that we can take it serious because we're not in the Himalayas, we're just trying to get on with our day, but maybe the weights, you're feeling it and you can bring that tool set in.
It's as real. The challenges down here, as opposed to say, being in the Himalayas, and they're as real, they're as tough, they're as, if not tougher, because those are artificial challenges that I put myself through, right? Yeah. But the stuff that comes at you on a Tuesday afternoon out of the blue, those are real things that, but when you've gone through those things, that helps you in that journey. And that's why I love it when I get kids that are pushing themselves and, really going hard in their sport and learning discipline and learning to turn up every day for training and learning to push their body and to experience pain and to push through pain barriers and training and things like that, because that teaches you to show up in life like that. To go through things.
100%. It's been a wonderful chat for me because I'll tell you a little story, a very quick one. About 13 years ago is when I started podcasting, and since then it became my job, not this podcast, but producing for other businesses and people.
Wow.
And I met a lady, I was part of a group that started a Korean shopping channel. All right, doesn't exist anymore. Sounds
Yeah.
like a weird thing. I'll write a book about it one day. But there was a lady there called Marnie, and she knew you or knew of you, and she said, you should interview Lisa. And this was
Oh.
way back then, and I kept you in my mind, but I didn't quite know how to reach out or why. And then when I started this podcast, one about optimism, I must have seen some of your work, and I thought, now's the right time. So it's just weird how life loops back around. That
Amazing, eh?
13 years ago, 400 podcasts ago, and today we got to chat. So I guess, Lisa, just want to say thank you for helping me make my podcast dreams come true, and also for sharing your beacon of hope today.
Thank you so much. Well, it's been an absolute honour to be on your show. I feel your passion and your love for people just comes bounding through the screen. Cool. So you're obviously doing a bloody good job, and thank you for the opportunity. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm very approachable. Just head over to lisatamati.com, because that's where my hub of everything is, everything I do. And yeah, let me know if you want to have a chat.
Awesome.
This episode of A Beacon of Hope is proudly brought to you by Campfire Studios. Campfire Studios is an impact-led organisation amplifying the voices of Māori and Pasifika communities via podcasting and video content. To find out more, visit campfirestudios.co.nz. 2, 3, 4. Thank you for tuning in to this frequency of hope in our podcast today. If you found value from this episode and want to hear more, I would love it if you could follow, subscribe, and rate our show. By doing so, you will increase the frequency of the Beacon of Hope. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform, please take a moment to hit the follow or subscribe button and leave a rating and review. I truly appreciate your support and feedback, and it helps us make our podcast even better. Thank you.
Be good. Be safe. And be happy. Yeah. Sounds like that song, doesn't it? Be happy.
All right, Mama, we'll stop there, eh?
Yeah, okay. All right.